Hi, and welcome to Opening Doors, the podcast here brought to you by Landmark Real Estate Management. I'm Troy Moliot, the owner of Landmark Real Estate, and today I have Ollie Taysi, who is the owner of AVT Consulting in Bellingham, Washington. And Ollie, welcome.
Thank
Welcome to
you.
the podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
You and I always cross paths with different clients, different things in multifamily in Bellingham specifically. And so it's just exciting to have you here and to be talking about a topic that I know is near and dear to our hearts, which is really the bigger picture of affordable workforce housing. And a tool that people have for that is the multifamily tax exemption in the city of Bellingham. And so I'd love for you to just simply explain to our audience, what is the multifamily tax exemption?
Yeah, be happy to.
Simply.
Yeah. In simple terms, the multifamily tax exemption is a tax abatement program that the state has allowed cities to adopt that gives a property owner a 8, 12, or 20-year tax abatement on a portion of their property taxes.
The improved portion.
The improved portion, yeah. So the land tax value remains, and this is for a multifamily. It's for residential only. So if you have a mixed-use building with a commercial component, the commercial component of that building is also taxed at the regular tax rate, but the residential component is abated completely, and it's not a deferral. It's a full abatement. So, you never pay that money back.
Which is a great thing for people as they're looking to develop a new building. It's a huge incentive. A lot of people have taken advantage of the 8-year. And explain to us the difference between like the 8-year and then the 12-year. I know the 20-year really nobody's using because that is mainly for sale properties. But the 8-year and the 12-year have applied a lot to multifamily rentals. So explain to us the difference there.
Yeah. So in Bellingham, I don't think anybody's used the 20-year yet. I have seen a few projects in Seattle that have utilized it for a condominium development. But in Bellingham, it's really the 8 and the 12. And predominantly the 8. And the state has provided cities with some flexibility on how they implement it. But what Bellingham has done is given the 8-year exemption effectively for free. So there's no preconditions associated with that other than being within what they call a targeted residential area. So they selected certain areas within Bellingham where this applies. And the only criteria is if you're doing a residential project of more than 6 units or 5 units, in one of those areas. And those areas are basically Bellingham's urban villages. So downtown, Samish, Fountain, now Barclay, Old Town, places like that. Yeah. The 12-year in our urban villages was only available for a project that incorporated 20% of the units as affordable housing, like big A, fixed affordable housing. So if you had a 10-unit apartment in an urban village, you could take an 8-year multifamily tax exemption for free. And if you wanted to designate 2 of those 10 units as permanently affordable, then you could take a 12-year, so you get 4 extra years. Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah,
which is huge. I mean, you're getting another 50% on that exemption, and the improved taxes can be a huge portion. I mean, that's a huge saving to the expenses that someone doesn't have to pay for 8 years.
Yeah, it's a big number.
Again, like for people that want to build, that incentive in those areas and in those zones in Bellingham. I don't have to pay property taxes on the improved portion, just the land, which that improved portion could be 80 or 90% of the tax bill.
Very easily.
So that's great. And I see taxes being anywhere from 6 to as high as 10% of that effective gross income. And so that's a huge chunk coming off the expense line for a developer and a huge incentive.
It's a big cash flow component, and in Bellingham the levy rate is about $11 per thousand of assessed value, roughly.
Yeah.
And so that can add up quick when your assessed value of your building gets pretty large. Right. Just to give a little bit of context, an example I have is a 4-story 14-unit apartment, and that tax bill annually is about $50,000, and about 45,000 of that is abated in that project.
Wow.
So yeah, like you said, it's like 90%.
Wow, that's great. Yeah.
And just you were talking about how much this has been done. I was just looking at some statistics. There's been 38 projects implemented in Bellingham since this program came into effect, with over 1,700 units that are subject to it. And 17 of those, so about 670 of those units, have actually completed their 8-year term and are now back on the tax rolls. So, from the government's perspective, they're giving that property owner a break, but they know that eventually that tax income is going to come back to the community after the term's done.
So the program that I think people are starting to get excited about and looking at are the 12-year, and that comes with some income stipulations. So you want to kind of simply try to walk us through that? And I know you've got the city's site and some of the information and some of the calculations up here as well. But tell us simply, what is the 12-year? I know you mentioned it, but dive a little bit deeper into what the 12-year does.
I can definitely do that. And one thing I want to also add is that historically, the program has been only allowed in our urban villages. And the logic behind that was that the city really wanted to incentivize the development of those areas that they had targeted. Just this year, just in the past 6 months, the city has expanded the MFTE program to all multifamily projects citywide, including infill toolkit projects, which are smaller townhouse style infill, as long as you do 5 or more units. But they only expanded the 12-year program. And so they said, we're gonna give this incentive to all residential development, but we're gonna ask that if you're going to take advantage of it, that you incorporate that affordable housing. So that's the rub with the 12 years. You have to have that affordable housing component.
So 12-year anywhere in the city limits.
Anywhere in Bellingham, if you build an apartment,
5 units or more.
5 units or more, infill toolkit applies, which means townhouses and small, a couple fourplexes on a lot. You can take advantage of the program. It's a 12-year program at that point. 20% of those units have to be affordable, and we can talk about that. That's the question you're getting at.
Right.
And the affordability term is only the term of the tax exemption. So you only have to keep those units at that permanently affordable rate for a 12-year term.
Okay.
And then once you lose the tax exemption, the entire project goes back to market rate.
Resets.
Yeah. And so to your question, Troy, like the way that they calculate that is that you have to provide those rental units at 80% of AMI.
Got it.
And so the state.
So explain to people. Define AMI.
So that's
now we're getting into jumbo here. The
so
terminology, but
average median income.
Great.
It's effectively the.
What is the Bellingham average median income today?
Well, it depends on.
Depends on your bedroom.
It depends on your bedroom.
So there's
count.
a grid. There's a grid that we've got, and we'll cut to that here now, but. Depending on that, but again, whether you have a studio, an efficiency unit, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4 bedroom, your AMI the total amount that you can have in rent really varies directly on what that AMI level is.
Yep, and that 80% level, based on the number of persons in the household, can range from 60,000 up to almost 86,000.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, and so basically that resets every year, and the City of Bellingham Community and Economic Development Department helps work with HUD. So they're getting these numbers from data from the state, and they're establishing the average median income for the community, and then they're setting that 80% threshold. And this is also used for grant funding through HUD for projects that are permanently affordable projects. Sure. So they use this data for lots of reasons.
Tax credits.
Tax credits.
Yeah,
also,
right.
Exactly.
But so do I have to then adjust my could somebody qualify 1 year and then the next year not qualify because the AMI gets set up at a different level?
I think that you could earn your way out of that.
Okay.
Yeah. I think one of the things that has been a barrier to the private sector, the nonprofit folks who are building housing in our community, is kind of like the fear factor around the management of these units.
Yeah.
Because they're not coming to Landmark and just saying, hey, I've got a 10-unit apartment. go ahead and manage it for me. There's this annual component of like checking. And anytime a new tenant comes forward who wants one of those units, they have to go through a qualification process.
Right.
So I think there's a little bit more information they need to provide. My understanding is that you guys are figuring out how to help people go through that process.
Yeah, we are. Thanks for the shameless plug. I appreciate that. But I mean, I think, if the program, someone can manage this and do it themselves. Like if they wanted to manage their own project and do it, and they were building a 5-unit and they had 1 unit that was an AMI, there is paperwork there and it's available to them that they have to process on a regular basis, and they can go through that and do that, or they can reach out to us and we can show them a little bit about what that looks like. And we'll provide some links to that paperwork and really essentially the math that's on the state side and the local site. So that's great. That's wonderful. Yeah.
The other thing that people can do is the city is really keen on implementing this program. And so within the Community and Economic Development Department, there's staff who are really helpful in kind of explaining this program.
They want this to happen.
They want it to happen.
Yeah.
So there's folks, if you were doing this on your own and you had a small a rental building and you wanted to go ahead and engage in this program, you could go down to the city and there'd be staff people who could help you kind of understand that.
Are they going to give me my permit faster?
You're not going to get your permit any faster. Unfortunately, no.
That's next episode, everyone.
Yeah. It depends where you're at, though. I will say one thing the city has done is they've implemented a tiered priority stack for review. And so if you're in an urban village where a lot of these multifamily tax exemption projects are, those are actually top tier now, and we're seeing a little bit quicker review times on those.
That's great.
But back to the income qualification component, you have to hit 80% AMI or below, and it's a thing that's really important to consider in that is that number, that rent number they set is inclusive of your mandatory utilities. So it's if you're saying, well, I'm going to rent this for $1,500 and that meets the 80%, that has to include your water, your sewer, your garbage, and your power. Now, if you want to get a fancy cable package, that's on you. But those 4 key components.
Cell phone, internet, excluded.
It's all excluded.
But like those hard utilities are included. And I think that's one that people start doing the math and they look and they say, man, I qualify. And we take a step back. Let's look at the utility charges here.
That's
if
right.
there's a rub, a utility bill back, or there's a direct bill to the tenant, we've got to make sure all of that's included. So that's a key point, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
And that's right. And that ties back to this concept that, to be cost burdened, an individual is spending more than 30% of their monthly income on living expenses, not just rent, but living, that not living expenses in total like groceries, but the cost of the housing, which includes your, you can't live in a house without water and sewer. You can't live in a house without power. So that's why that's built into that number. So, just as an example, some of these numbers for 2025 that we're looking at, the 80% AMI cap for a studio unit is $1,518. So if you can incorporate whatever that rub is that you referred to.
If I got a couple $100, I got to be at just over $1,300.
Yeah, the one bedroom is $1,627. You jump all the way up to $2,255 for a 3-bed. Now, you would know better than me, but what I'm seeing with some of our clients and the rents that they are charging is we're not that far off
they're
the
really
market.
They're really close to market. Yeah. Absolutely. They're really close to market.
Yeah.
And so that's great. And so I think there is some opportunity out there. So
I think so
love
too.
Yeah.
And I want people, a lot of people I talk to, they want to provide this opportunity. But when we were looking at the delta between an 8-year program in an urban village for free and a 12-year with this affordability mandate, that 4-year delta, it just wasn't moving the needle enough to push people into it. And one thing I'm excited about is when you start looking at the delta between nothing, no incentive, and 12 years, then that math is starting to make sense. It's making sense from a cash flow perspective for the developer. It incentivizes them to do this, and it may make sense for the the pro forma side of the construction, maybe. Yeah. But when you look at a couple $100 a month difference on a unit between the market and that, but you're talking about 40, 50 grand or more, 100 grand a year in tax savings,
Right. Yeah.
you
Maybe bringing one unit down in 5 to maybe hit
Yeah.
that threshold might make sense for
yeah,
people. So
it really does.
So,
And
so question, we've got a lot of clients out there that have existing buildings and they've never maybe gone in and qualified for a program. Could they go qualify for an existing property, or is this only for new properties?
that's a really good question. If you are just a market rate project anywhere in town, and now your area has been allowed to utilize this program, you cannot bring an existing building into the multifamily tax exemption program. But if you own a property that is currently utilizing the 8-year program, this new ordinance that the city passed allows you, when your 8-year term is up, to reapply for the 12-year term on the back end of it.
So an extra 4 or a new 12?
A new 12. So
Wow.
if you've been taking advantage of 8 years of tax abatement, in year 8, you can apply and you can say, I want to now convert 20% of my units to meet the affordability criteria, and they're going to give you 12 more years, and so you could effectively have a 20-year tax.
So there's
abatement
1,700 units out there that could maybe go after this.
that could extend.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And
That's
and most
great.
of those 1,700 are using the 8-year.
8-year.
There's been very few,
Yeah.
if any, 12-year because
Right.
because that delta I was talking about just didn't make sense for
Right.
people.
Interesting. So that's a great little niche for people to look at and consider as the market softened a bit with higher vacancies, a lot of construction that was built back in 2020 through 2022, and the AMI not too far off from market, but depending on the unit size and
Yeah.
such. So
Now, the one thing, and you know this, that the market will dictate what the market rents are. And so you're not fixing this for the full term, in the sense that if you go into a project and you say, geez, the rents aren't too bad at the 80% AMI, relative to market rate rents. And so this makes sense. Well, if we had a supply constraint like we did in the past decade and market rents continued to increase annually, that distance between the affordable and the market might change during the term of your MFT. So there needs to be a little bit of thought put into that, and make sure that you're not hovering right on the cusp of what makes sense. I think you, as a interested party, developer, property owner, you'd want to make sure that this made sense, even if that delta shifted a little bit.
but if I'm saving 70, 80, 90% of my tax bill, definitely have to run a cost benefit analysis. Because it could be worth it.
Yeah, we're in my office. We're trying to build a little spreadsheet right now to do that analysis. We were meeting with the assessor to understand how they calculate the taxes, and looking at these 80% AMI numbers for 2025 to start to try and see, does this make sense? One thing that's been really interesting is that I think the vast majority of these MFTE applications have come in for like larger apartment buildings.
Right.
15, 20, 40, 80, 100 units.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And people weren't thinking about it in the context of these smaller projects. And when you start looking at this in conjunction with the middle housing laws that just got passed that afford people the opportunity to put a lot more infill toolkit units on a property. And
the ADU rules.
The ADU rules, the middle housing rules, House Bill 1110, all of a sudden, we're going to start seeing more and more 5, 6, 7, 8 unit infill projects. And a lot of those folks are maybe a one-off developer, or they're interested in this type of thing, giving back their neighborhood or something. And now they have this opportunity. Those projects are also tougher to pencil a lot of the time, because there's a lot of infrastructure associated with a small project. And so now there's this opportunity to maybe, make the cash flow analysis look a little bit better.
Absolutely,
for them.
yeah.
And they're only, like you said, they're only maybe allocating 1, maybe 2 of those units within the project.
So if I have an 8 unit, I still got to round up and do 2.
Yeah, if you're at 1.15
I gotta get
units,
at least 20% or more.
Yeah,
Right.
you gotta get
Exactly.
2.
So can't have 0.72% of a unit.
No.
We're talking about cash flow, and that's something that we do a lot of pro formas for people, and you and I have worked with clients before. You help a lot of clients with the permitting, the process, all the minutia that no one wants to deal with, which is wonderful. And you have really dominated that market, and I know you're busy with a lot of projects and things that are going on. And then, I tend to help people on the pro forma side where we're looking at the numbers and does it make sense? And one thing that's been, I think, a struggle for the lending community, because a lot of people that are building larger projects or getting loans, is looking at that exemption and saying, well, what do I do? I'm not paying taxes. I'm saving 90% of my tax bill. Does that truly come off the expenses, or do I have to put it in and then back it off a different way? And so most lenders, and I know appraisers and lenders are having this debate and discussion, they want to put the taxes in on the 8 or even the 12 year at the full value, but then they do a cash flow analysis on the savings, and then they basically give that back in the loan proceeds. So it's not getting the full credit from a cash flow standpoint, or ultimately for a developer that's building something, they're looking at their debt coverage ratio. How much loan proceeds can I get to build this project? So I don't know. Do you think we'll see that change? And will bankers and appraisers start to look at this 12 year as maybe more 12 years are done and address that issue?
I hope so. This is something we've talked about before, I know, and I understand I think the reticence from a loan officer or appraiser to just kind of give that full value, because it's relatively new still, particularly the 12 year. I think you and I had talked at one point about how sometimes if the term of the loan doesn't line up good,
right,
with that term, that can be a problem because it's not guaranteed. As we see more of these, and I expect with the expansion to citywide, we will see more of them. I'm hoping that the comfort level with this kind of analysis will increase, and it'll help move the needle. Obviously, if we can get that full value applied, it's going to lower the capital contribution needed from folks to do projects,
right.
And that will help move them forward. Because one thing I'm encountering representing homeowners and developers is that in the past few years, with interest rates going up and some uncertainty in the market, that debt coverage ratio request has gone up, right?
Yeah. So bankers wanting more little higher DCR ratio, obviously with costs going up as well, and then with interest rates going up, it's just been harder and harder to make things pencil. So if my expense ratio, for example, is like 28% with a normal project, or 30%, and all of a sudden I can save 4, 5, 6, 7% of my expenses because of the taxes. Wow. I mean, all of a sudden the pro forma works, the debt coverage ratio works. I can get the proceeds. I can spend a little bit more on the property and make it happen. So that's really the big issue that we're seeing. That's the bottleneck, other than interest rates dropping or costs coming down 10, 20, 30%, which probably won't happen.
Yeah, I agree. Now, if you can get, it would be great. I think it would open up the lending opportunities to more borrowers if we could get that incorporated, because like I mentioned, these smaller projects, if you have a homeowner who has a property that they've owned for a long time, and they want to infill that property and better utilize it, it's got capacity for more development based on the size and the zoning, that person might not be really well capitalized, and so anything they can do to lower the amount of cash they need to bring to the project to get it to work is going to help them get in. So if we can find a way to kind of crack that nut, like you're talking about, I think we'll broaden the number of people who can make a project financially viable out the gates. Now, if you have the capability to satisfy that that loan term, then it's kind of a no-brainer, because then you can back end that extra income, and like you said, it's a pretty significant number, and so then it's making a lot of sense for the people who have the capability to go get a loan today.
Absolutely. Yeah. So true.
It's kind of a no-brainer. My office has worked on every new multifamily mixed-use project in the Fountain District, and 10 in the downtown area, and every single one of them has taken the 8-year MFTE. And I talk to those clients all the time, and it is a big deal on the back end. It really does help. It helps insulate against rent fluctuations a little bit. It provides them a little bit of security, because there's more there's more spread
Right,
between
right,
their
absolutely.
costs
Yeah, yeah.
or their expenses and their
Or they could
revenues.
put more into the housing,
Yeah.
or and ultimately build more housing. So I think that's really the big goal here, is providing more housing options, because I think that's the big struggle is we don't have a lot of housing options. Inventory's been tight for many, many years. It's starting to come back a bit, starting to soften a bit, but we like to say that the supply side will definitely help bring costs down and more opportunities for tenants and ultimately people wanting to buy.
Yeah, and we've seen that locally even in the past year, I think,
Right,
with
right.
with the way rents have gone, and in some other communities. I think that more units, the more different types of units, the application of this citywide, like I mentioned, bringing in infill toolkit housing, where you can build detached single family homes, you can build townhouses, you can build cottage courtyard developments, duplex, triplex, fourplex units. That's a different product, and we need lots and lots of different types of housing. And historically, this has mostly been utilized for apartment buildings.
Yeah.
So, I think it's really going to help incentivize, by making it citywide, it's going to help incentivize a broader range of housing forms. The other thing that I really like about this is that the 12-year, is that it gets a mixed demographic into a property. So a lot of the time, and what we see in our community, is that affordable housing gets built by nonprofits, the Bellingham Housing Authority, Culture Community Land Trust, and
And we see those numbers, and they're not cheap.
no, they're very expensive, right? And for whatever reason, I haven't figured this out yet, but those projects tend to cost more per square foot
Right.
than a market rate project, and then you see market rate projects that are just that. And I talk to a lot of people who share this opinion, but having those demographics mixed within a building or a community is actually like a healthy thing.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
You're not separating
Yeah.
people or segregating based on income class or anything. I think that I've heard the counterpoint to that being like, well, that fear of like, does it bring the building down? But when you talk about these rent numbers,
Yeah, no,
I mean,
don't think so at all.
if you're a member of our community and you can afford $200 less per month, you're not very different from that person who
Right.
can afford $200 more. And I
Absolutely.
think like there's like a classism around that is disappointing, that I hear a lot when I'm, say, conducting a neighborhood meeting.
Yeah.
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 And I don't like that. And I heard it when I was on planning commission from people, complaining about renters as if renters are a monolith, type. And so I think that this has the potential. Well, this is brand new, but it has the potential to kind of like crack that, that fallacy, and really show that we're all from Bellingham. We're all kind of working hard and going to work and coming home and raising our families.
I think if the developers out there can take advantage of this and then put those AMI units in their own buildings, continue to build the projects that they've got, it's a win-win for everybody.
Totally.
It's a win for the community. It's a win for the tenants. It's a win for the developer. I mean, to me, it just makes a lot of sense. And so I think you're really helping people move forward, educating them, helping them with the process, and you'll help them start to finish.
Me?
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, our tagline is from idea to occupancy. So
I
you
love
come
that.
in,
I
you
love
have an
that.
idea,
Yeah.
you want to do something, whether you have money or land or neither, but you want to do something, and we can help you understand what you can do, where you can do it, and then how to get there from start to finish.
So if people want to know more about like a little bit of the information on the city site, you're on the city website. City of Bellingham has some resources here on the multifamily tax exemption.
Yeah.
The MFTE program, and that's there. They can also reach out to you and talk to you, and we'll have a link to all of these in the podcast here and in the links and such. So that's awesome. I think that's just great. So
yeah, it's really easy. If you were to go to, you could surely reach out to us or someone at the city. I could share the right contact for the city.
Great.
But if you went to the City of Bellingham website and just typed multifamily tax exemption into the search, they have a dedicated page. It's got all the information.
There it all is.
Yeah,
right there.
everything you need to do, application forms, the whole kit and caboodle. And they're trying to make it easier to do. And so I think...
Yeah, they want these projects. They want them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they want them. Yeah,
Bellingham wants them.
Which is great. Now, any other city in Whatcom County doing this?
At this stage, I think that Bellingham is kind of the leader on this, and they have the critical mass to do that.
Yeah.
I know Ferndale is exploring MFTE.
Yeah.
I don't know how well formulated that is at this stage. We've not yet done an MFTE project in Ferndale, but I have talked to Ferndale planning staff, planning director, and they are exploring MFTE and like working to try and get MFTE implemented.
Yeah.
That's as far as I've seen it go at this point. But part of that is that I think even non-MFTE affordable housing projects have really coalesced around Bellingham historically. You know,
Where do we want to grow?
yeah,
Is really the question.
yeah, and
bigger
I
question.
mentioned KCLT. They're doing a project in Ferndale right now, and it's kind of like their first foray out, you know, into Ferndale at the scale that they're working at, and Ferndale's been super receptive to that project, and so we're starting to see that spread as Ferndale and Linden have grown. You know, our next two largest cities, and Blaine a little bit. Where it's at now, though, where the real, I think, vast majority of the opportunity is in Bellingham.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. And you know, it's such a great way to grow and to incentivize the developers. But this program, solving the middle housing crisis and the issue in and around affordable workforce housing, there's so many other ways. And like we touched on a bit, and we don't have enough time to dive into it, but give us the 60-second, 2-minute synopsis of the ADU rule, because I know you spend a lot of time helping people
Yeah.
with infill toolkit, ADUs, and taking what used to be a single family lot and turning it into a duplex or even a fourplex.
Yeah. Well, you're right. There's like a ton of factors in what makes our housing, you know, affordability crisis what it is. Some of them we can't control.
Yeah.
You know, macroeconomic stuff like interest rates. But I think the state, our state legislature, and to a certain degree, our local politicians have recognized that there is a supply side economics component of this, that more housing, more supply should bring rents down. It should bring sale prices down, because right now we still have really high demand, right? And we're all competing for limited amount of resources. And so the two laws that the state passed in this past 3 years that Bellingham has already adopted ahead of time are the ADU bill, House Bill 1337, and then what they're calling the Middle Housing Bill, which is House Bill 1110. And they work in tandem. And the deadline for both those to be adopted is the end of this year. And City Council voted to adopt interim regulations earlier this year, and just on Monday this week voted in what will be most of the permanent regulations to meet the state deadline. And so what those two laws do is, if you own, on the ADU side, if you own a single family home and you want to add accessory dwelling units, you can add 2 accessory dwelling units to your lot now. Any single family lot can have 2 ADUs. The watershed is excluded. They're trying to limit development in the watershed, but that's really the only hard exclusion. And those can be in any form. They can be attached to the home, detached from the home, attached to each other, stacked on top of each
Can't
other.
be the same size. There's a size regulation.
There is a size
Yeah,
regulation,
yeah.
although the size regulation is 1,000 square feet per unit.
Okay.
But if you had 2 attached to each other, they can each be 1,000.
Okay.
And we were running into barriers with those units because the garage would count against that 1,000 square feet. And in the update that the city adopted on Monday, a couple days ago, they changed that, and they now allow up to 800 square feet of accessory space.
Okay.
Shop,
Wow,
garage,
wow.
whatever.
Interesting.
So you can have, you can have more room.
Yeah, I'm seeing more and more plans with big shops and big garages,
Yeah.
and still the 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, it was it didn't really make a lot of sense. So that's a real big thing. And the other thing that law did is it said there's no owner occupancy requirement anymore. So you could rent both of them. You can rent a home and the ADU.
Yeah.
You don't have to live in one of them. And so that's a really big change that occurred. You can also condominiumize and sell the ADU.
Wow. Yeah.
So we just actually finished our first condominium ADU project, and the units are, I think 2 of the 3 are sold, but it was a single family lot, and it was a small local builder, and they took this vacant lot and they built one standard single family home. So, an 1,800 square foot, 2-car garage home. And then they built 2 detached ADUs, each with a 1-car garage behind the home. So you got 3 units on that single family lot, and then they condominiumized and listed for sale all 3. So there you go. We got
Yeah.
3 for sale homeownership opportunities out of a lot that a year and a half ago would have only allowed 1.
It's just it's really incredible.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's really incredible. From a density standpoint and a growth standpoint, there's also a scary side. Everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, every lot's a triplex or
Yeah,
fourplex."
yeah.
So
Well, and that's just scratching the surface because
Yeah.
the middle housing bill, House Bill 1110, the state mandated adoption, and that's going into effect now, allows 4 to 6 primary units per lot. So not only is every lot a triplex lot if you want to do 2 ADUs, but if you want to do middle housing, which is they call it infill toolkit housing, you can do up to 6 units
Wow.
on a lot, and those can be, like I mentioned, detached single family, townhouses, cottage dwellings, duplex, triplex, fourplex, and an existing home doesn't count toward that number. So if you own a big lot,
6 in addition to the single family house.
yeah, so if you own a big lot with a house on it,
Wow.
you can build 4 to 6
Then
additional
you can,
units.
and then if you're in an area, or then if you're in the city of Bellingham, you can add in the 12-year tax exemption, and voila.
There you go. And those types of units can again be subdivided. So the neat thing about that is it gives a homeowner, a property owner, developer the choice to say, I'm going to do a rental project or I'm going to do a for sale project. And previously there was a lot of difficulty getting a rental type project into a single family neighborhood, or vice versa, a for sale product into a multifamily zone. And now they've kind of like pulled back the curtain and said, you can choose what you want to do.
Yeah.
There's no parking regulations either, Troy.
Well,
So
I was just going to
you
say,
can
that's the
choose whatever you
last
want.
thing we have to talk about is parking, because that's also a big discussion in the city of Bellingham is, do I have to park it anymore?
Yeah, and you don't. I mean, as it stands today, no parking is required by code. So the state passed a parking law as well, parking legislation, and that legislation made it illegal for cities to require parking of a certain size. A lot of our smaller cities are not subject to these regulations. Bellingham is because of our size.
Yeah, so really a lot of these, and depending on how many units you can build on an ADU, it does come down to city size. So you have to look at statewide.
Yeah.
Some of these are state rules, some of them are at the local level, and so you have to kind of check within your municipality if you're outside the city of Bellingham or in a smaller town within Whatcom County.
Yeah. The ADU rules, for example, are adopted in Ferndale already as well. But the missing middle rule, that middle housing rules, don't even apply to a city of Ferndale size. I think it's 25,000 is the cutoff. But yeah, I mean, it's really going to change. And this I talk about this with people at our neighborhood meetings. For better or worse, it's going to change what we conceive of single family zoning.
Yeah.
Like we've all lived our entire lives with this construct of single family and multifamily, and really that is going to change dramatically in the next decade. And not every site can accommodate all this. Number one, every site's different. Number two, not every is going to want to do this. So it's not going to be every single lot, but there will be these pockets of development that are occurring that will really change how many of our neighborhoods that we're used to. I think 70+% of Bellingham is actually single family zoning.
Wow.
So a lot of that is going to change.
And probably half of the city rents mainly due to the university influence.
Yeah, I think it's right
So
around
that's
half.
really going to change the dynamic specifically in Bellingham.
Yeah.
What's Bellingham going to look like in 10 years?
I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I've been here my whole life. It's doubled in
Same here.
size,
I know.
right?
I know.
In our lifetimes, Bellingham has doubled. I think we're going to see more variety of rental product because of these infill projects. A lot of the multifamily housing is, I'm sure in the past decade has been apartment buildings.
Yeah.
And we're going to probably see more variety of rental housing forms. Hopefully we'll get more for sale product, because that's something we've struggled with.
Right.
Is not having, we don't want to grow out, but there's only so much land in.
Yeah.
So we're, in theory, trying to better utilize land.
Well, that's why that condo or even a zero lot line type of parcel situation could really work out well. A townhouse, something. When you mentioned the C word, condo, that scares people. Would I do an air condo or would I do a building condo? Because I know building condo laws, there's a lot of issues around that, and people are scared about the liability pieces of that. So
I think that fear still exists, and there's still barriers in the insurance industry. and the liability associated with those building condos, because we have only worked on maybe one or two ever in 20 plus years. But the example I gave you of the home with 2 ADUs, it was an airspace condo, which means that the condo unit boundary is the yard.
Land
so
only.
your unit includes your
Yeah.
yard, and then there's no common wall that someone's going to leak, their plumbing into.
Right.
And
Well, I haven't constructed an improvement which would have the material defect clause, which is
Exactly.
really at the legal standard at the state level.
So I think that developer found it much easier to finance and insure that condominium project because of the airspace approach. So that we'll see what happens with the condo component. On parking, I am not working with anybody who's really saying let's just do no parking, because they know they can't rent or sell a unit without any parking.
Makes our lives really difficult on the management side.
Yeah, we make it hard enough for you by
right.
underparking them, right?
Right.
But I am seeing people utilize that, much like the MFTE. Let's say your pro forma's close. MFTE might move the needle enough to make this thing financeable if we can convince the banks to incorporate that. What I'm finding with parking is the same thing. Someone might say, this project will make sense financially if I could get 2 more units.
Yeah.
And in the past, 12 units versus 10. But in the past, there was no physical space to park those units. We couldn't meet parking code.
Yeah.
So we were either just suffering with fewer units or asking for complex waivers that take time.
That extra few units of density can make all the difference.
It could. And so people are making the choice to say, I'm still going to park this thing, but I'm going to add these 2 or 3 extra units like for free, so to speak, and just take the risk because the rent from those makes it financially viable. Right. So that's what I'm saying.
If they ever converted to a condo, or if they ever did actually do something where they sold it out, that becomes a pretty big market barrier.
I agree.
Especially with Bellingham, at least that it's not a big city yet.
No.
So, and it'd probably take a few years or decades to get there. So
yeah.
But the alternative too of building a 20, 30, 50 unit complex and then having to build underground parking, which could be $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a stall of manufacturing land.
Yeah,
it's not a bad option if your rents were to come down a little bit to offset no parking or limited parking. And I think that's been a benefit. And we've seen some projects that have underparked, still have parking, and they're doing well.
Yeah, I'd be curious to understand the dynamic around that more, since I'm helping permit them, but I'm not participating in them.
We're living the ramification of your permitting issues.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll do a follow-up in a few years to look at some case studies and actually see like what is actually happening. But we'll have to really dive into a parking study and look at it, because more and more people aren't driving, or you're seeing more people that are sharing cars. Although there have been some incentives out there where people have said, hey, if I provide an e-bike or something, I could then reduce my parking. This was before parking was eliminated, and that didn't really work. And so I think that no parking, the market will determine where the value is on those units.
Totally. And you probably know this, but what I've seen is a lot of that is locational. Yeah. So, if you build an apartment right up near campus and you're targeting a student population, you're probably going to do better without parking than if you build an apartment on King Mountain or on Kellogg Road, or even out here in Cordata, where the proximity to services, the bus service, the bike lanes aren't as good. So
how walkable am I?
Yeah, exactly.
And am I driving to a job? Do I have bus? Am I on the bus line, or do I have to actually need a car to get somewhere? So
parking's one that comes up at every single meeting we have, and it's really an interesting dynamic. And there's a chicken and the egg component, because a lot of people say, well, we don't have good enough transit to make this work. I can't live here without a car because I don't have the bus to ride. But then if you talk to WTA, they say, well, we need more people living here for us to justify spending the resources on more frequency. So, which comes first, the people that trigger the higher frequency, or the higher frequency that accommodates the people? I don't know the answer to that, but I have been involved in conversations with WTA, and I know that they're talking about this issue. And so, for example, what I've heard is that there might be more of a shift over the next few years toward higher frequency over expanded area. So instead of adding more lines to different areas, increasing the frequency of those lines because where we know we have the people.
Right,
So it's an interesting dynamic. And yeah, like you said, we'll
yeah.
do a little social experiment going on in
Sounds
Bellingham.
good.
We'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, this has been awesome. I mean, this is long overdue. You and I have been wanting to get together and talk about this, and I think this is probably the first of many conversations that we'll have. Thank you
Yeah,
for coming in
happy
today and
to.
talking about this. If you want to reach out to Ali and his staff, or explore anything or ask any questions, we'll have some of that information in the notes in this podcast. But on behalf of Ali and myself, Troy Moliat, thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you out in the marketplace.
Thanks, Troy.